Hello, it's Scott Hadley here with another part of my beginner's tutorial series. I am finally back in America, and the mission we have today, which I have picked up from the contract, is to rescue Ali Kerman from orbit around Kerbal. Now, Ali is in a spacecraft, but if you select it, all you can do is stop tracking and basically, well, abandon all hope. To actually get control, you have to get within 2.5 kilometers, and that means matching orbits and matching positions, something known as orbital rendezvous, which is a very important skill to learn. And it's it's a prerequisite for learning how to dock. So let's start building a spacecraft to rescue Ali. So we need a capsule to bring them back, we need a probodobodyne so we can fly the capsule, and while we're here, we're going to remove Jebediah Kerman as the pilot, because this is going to have to come down. Obviously, if you send up a pilot without, if you send up a pilot in there, then it'll be kind of pointless to rendezvous. Although I guess you could always leave, your crew in orbit. Yeah, okay, so that's what's going to come back. Let's put some solar panels on the side as well, and of course, all capsules now, you should probably have a heat shield for good measure. Now, to get up into space, we're going to obviously use the good old FLT 400. Oh, and I forgot to put in a separator. Stack separator, very important. This will do all our on-orbit maneuvering, the little Terrier liquid-fueled engines. And again, we're going to build like a regular launch stack underneath this, using the tricks that we know, learn, and love. There, like that. Ah, you know what? I need to zoom out a little. So you hold shift and then again hold alt. Bingo, stick that on the bottom. And finally, an engine on here. Some control surfaces. Actually, we don't need anything more than basic fins. So put 4 of those on. Some little boosters to help it get off the pad. Remember, boosters are there to provide thrust early on. They're not there to provide the delta V that you actually need long term. I'm trying to get these things centered, and I am having a terrible time. That is much better, thank you. Okay, and the RT-10 hammer. If I had a hammer, I'd launch into orbit. Or something like, I'd launch all over this land. So call this Rescue 1. Rescue 1. And time to launch. Okay, so the pad is loaded, we're ready to go. Let's bring up our resources. Throttle to 100%, lock the stability control, and go to the map. Now, the map is important. The map shows us that they're actually on the other side of the planet. They also show us that the orbit is pretty much in the plane of the planet. So what we need to do is launch into this same orbit, but we want to launch close to them. So I'm going to basically time accelerate. Now, if the orbit is inclined, then you still have to make sure you launch underneath their orbit. But since there's almost no inclination here, we're always sitting underneath their orbit. So I'm going to wait until they're out over this sea here, roughly, and then I'm going to launch into orbit. Now, before I do this, I should also set that as target. And it'll show me here that their periaps is 72, their apoaps is 83, which means their average is about 77 kilometers. So I'm going to initially, because their lowest point is so close to the atmosphere, I'm going to launch early and get out in front of them. And then I'm going to get into a higher orbit. And because I'm in a higher orbit, they will catch up on me. And I will then be able to perform the intersect, right? But I'm initially going to launch ahead of them just to make sure that I can do this in a higher orbit. Now, if they are higher up, you can actually go into a lower orbit to catch up. But right now, we're going to do it this way, because the atmosphere offers us no choice but to go for the high orbit slow approach. Throttle to 100%, in nuclear batteries to power, turbines to speed. Let's go, Batman. Not Batman. Because who is it? Actually, we've got no pilots in here. Yes, it's going to be Ali Kerman is going to be our pilot. Again, throttle down early on when you're using those solid rocket boosters once your speed gets above 200. Then back to 100% and ditch those. And we're just going to continue to travel over here. Now, you want to try and keep this exactly on the 90 because that's going to be where their orbit is. The fins should stop you from being able to arc over too much. Notice that we're not gaining too much speed right now because this engine is very weak compared to a rocket of this mass, but we've got, you know, 100 meters per second, several hundred meters per second due to those solid rocket boosters, right? This is just giving us more, you know, more time to get out of the gravity well and get up to speed, so we can build such a long rocket, a long and slender rocket. So coming back out to the map here, and we can take a look at our trajectory. A really useful rule when you're trying to get into orbit is to look at the time that it takes until you get to apoapse. Now, you only get that once you've upgraded the tracking center. If you find that your time is increasing, that's good. If it is decreasing, it's a sign that you are going too flat and don't have the fuel or don't have the thrust. So you want to probably keep it around 40 to 50 seconds, depending on the rocket here. So I'm going a little flat because I'm seeing this increasing very slowly. That's totally acceptable here. I'm probably gonna, you know, heat up my rocket quite a bit doing this. Now I'm gonna go for, if you remember, I said that they had an average of about 77, so I'm gonna go up to about 80 initially. Actually, let's go up to 80 initially, and then we'll try to circularize there. So again, look at the time is increasing, so just keep this flat. Once it gets above about a minute, then you're all cool. 1 minute, we're on our way to orbit, and you see our thrust went to 0. That is a sign that we've run out of fuel here. So I'm just going to ditch those before the memory leak kills my computer. Look at it spinning away there. That's the atmosphere that's doing it. Okay, so I still have to get into orbit here. 43 kilometers, so activate my engine. And keep this thing going. 45 seconds. We spent a little bit of time here that we probably shouldn't have. But that's okay. So this is here. Currently 157 kilometers away. And that's fine. We're just going to get ourselves up into the higher orbit. Yeah, this is actually way shallower than I should have done. Doesn't matter, we'll fix that. I'll now flatten this out. It's always hard to balance these things when you're trying to talk about them at the same time. So we're going to wait until this gets up to about 80 kilometers. Oh, there, 84, that's good. Of course, it's now decreasing because we're still at 45 kilometers and the atmosphere is slowing us down. But let's just do a little bit of time acceleration and see how we do here. Altitude 48. You know, let's actually just give this another puff of fuel to make sure we get up to the altitude we need. You can see that we've got perihelion actually outside the planet now, so we're almost in orbit. It's just very, very slow. Very, very long time to get to orbit here because we're spending a lot of time in the atmosphere. So this, if we left this, we would eventually end up falling back to the planet Kerbal. You can't use regular time acceleration inside the atmosphere, you can only use physics time acceleration, and physics time acceleration is a lot less efficient because it requires the computer to calculate all the various motions of your spacecraft. Just going to push a little more energy into this thing. So while we're time accelerating through this, when you have this object targeted, right, you can see these target position estimates when the orbits get close. They won't always be there, it'll only happen when you start to have close encounters. And this basically shows you where you will be and then where they will be. It says target position at intersect, and this is my position. I'm 167 kilometers away. Here, on the other hand, that's 135. What's happened is, over this section, I've gone up into a higher and slower orbit, and during this orbit, because I'm slower, they're catching up, so by the time I fall back, they are now getting closer, which is fine. Okay, so I'm just going to use this for my orbital insertion. It will be a 3-second burn, and then from there we can actually start to perform the rendezvous. Okay, 220, whatever. I just needed to get an estimate of how much thrust I needed, and bingo. That's good. Okay, so now we're in orbit. They are sitting 150 kilometers away, and they are orbiting below us. Now, over time, what's going to happen is, because I'm in a higher orbit, they're going to catch up on me, which is pretty good. The other thing we want to do probably before rendezvous is match our inclination. See, we have an ascending node here. So the ascending node is where the two planes cross. And to fix your orbital inclination, you just add a maneuver. Now, if it's the ascending node, that means that they're going up relative to you, or you're going up relative to them, right? So you want to actually push down, and that will decrease. You see, 0.7, 0.5, 0.3. You see that? Just as simple as that. And you know what? If you do drag the wrong one, then it's okay. You can just undo. There, a 28 meter per second burn. This is a plane change maneuver in low orbit. Remember when I did the plane change maneuver in the previous episode? We did it at the top of an orbit, at the highest point, because that was the slowest. Well, we can't afford to do that here. This is why it's very important to get your inclination set up correct to start with. So I'm gonna warp to the next maneuver. Will bring me in nice and close. Again, they are catching up on us because we're in a slightly higher orbit. We have plenty of time to adjust for this. There we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Again, just throttle this. I'm going to do it at slightly less than 100% because it says 1 second. You want to get this as close as possible. Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. Let's kill this. And now the ascending node is 0. So we're practically in the same orbit here. So we have a couple of options. We can just time accelerate and watch this thing get closer and closer. And it'll take a little bit of time. Now, the other thing we can do is we could actually perform the various maneuvers here. But I think this is a good way to do that. We see how we're getting closer and closer. While he gets down to periaps, or that's my periaps, I'll be going possibly... No, he's still going faster than me. So, just wait for this to happen. And this is perhaps a good time for me to edit this with a musical interlude or something. No, I'm just going to keep talking about this. So the standard rule with orbits is if you're in a higher orbit than the target, it will catch up on you. If you're in a lower orbit, then you will catch up on it. So that's your idea. If you're trying to match orbits with something, you have to either go lower or higher so that your speed lets you catch up. Okay, distance 113. Getting closer. So once we get within about 100 kilometers, what's my position, by the way? That's my periaps. Mine is 79 and 82. So I'm always higher than them, so they're always going to catch up. You notice that at apoaps we catch up faster and faster, or rather we tend to get closer because we're moving more slowly, so the lead is decreased. At this point, I should be able to look backwards in space, and you can see them sitting there. This is going to be important for final rendezvous. Also, you'll see that our close approach, it keeps on happening at apoaps is going to be our closest point, and it's simply due to the fact that we're in roughly similar orbits, and this is the point where we're moving slowest, so he's going to end up always being closest there. Now you can of course make adjustments to make sure you arrive at the right time. So let's just see our relative altitudes when we get here. His is 83, mine's 83, so actually this is pretty good because our orbits are going to practically coincide at this position here. So this is taking time. I think what I'm going to do is just perform a maneuver here, right? So I'm going to insert a maneuver. It's in 31 seconds. Let's do a maneuver here, right? And what I'm going to do is just increase my orbit. See, 12 kilometers. So if I just increase my orbit a little more, you'll see these are getting closer, just slightly. 4.3 kilometers. And this is like super light. I'm just doing this. It's very easy to overdo it. Oh, there you see. And I overdid it. Speak of the devil. 0.5. So 500 meters is close enough for us to actually consider a proper intercept. And notice that's only a 2 meter per second burn here, right? It's very small maneuvers you need once you get into orbit. The space shuttle needed to get up to, 7.2 kilometers per second to get into orbit. But once it was in orbit, its engines only allowed it to make about 300 meters per second of changes. And that was enough for it to rendezvous and dock with space stations and perform its various other missions. Once you're in orbit, you really only need very small amounts of fuel, unless you're trying to escape, or or you're trying to do plane change maneuvers. And I was talking at the same time there, and I managed to overdo this a little. So let's just touch it very carefully, and bingo. Okay, well, let's see how this looks. It says 1.2 kilometers. I'm going to flip it around one more time and give it another very slight nudge here. Now, if you want to get super precision, one thing you can do, it's hard to see here, but you can right-click on the liquid-fueled engine, and you can adjust the thrust limiter. So that way, you know, full thrust is now 10% thrust, so very low thrust is even lower. So I can just do this a touch. There, you see that? I'm just doing a very small thrust, 4.3, there, 0.3 kilometers. And it's also a good idea to turn that back to 100% until you're ready. So there you go, that's another really useful trick. Now what we're going to do is we're going to wait around one more orbit here. And it's made the prediction, 0.3 kilometers. And we should just be able to watch this thing. There it is. And once we get within about, I don't know, 10 kilometers, let's say. This thing is coming towards us, right? How are we doing? Oh, we're a ways away. Once we get to here, I'm gonna start making some terminal corrections here to adjust for the final approach, right? We'll do that just as night is about to fall. How about that? So now we're getting down to 765. Look at our speed here. Our speed is like 20 meters per second, right? So we're getting very close here. Unfortunately, rendezvous is going to happen on the dark side of the planet. And now that we're actually within 2.2 kilometers, we could just take control of Ali's craft, right? Now, to take control, you can use the square braces. Those are up next to the P key on most keyboards. You can just push them and you get control of this spacecraft. You see that? So this is now Ali Kerman. Push it again and I've got control of this. I'm going to actually make sure that we perform this final rendezvous just to show you how this works. Now see this nav ball at the bottom? It at the top says target. That means it's in target relative velocity mode. You can click on that to change it back to the raw orbital velocity or even the surface velocity, but target relative velocity is what you're wanting. Now you can see the velocity vector here. That's actually pointing our relative velocity relative to the target. And this pink marker is showing where the actual target is. So you can see that our velocity vector is slightly offset from the actual target position. So what I could do is put my thrusters roughly here. I'm just kind of guessing and make a very small thrust, right? And I've got to move back. You see, that's changing it just a little. This is adjusting my orbit. I'm just making it by about 1 meter per second. These are far from perfect, but that's just bringing our approach closer and closer. Now you can also point away from the target, which is very useful. You can see I'm pointing away from it now, and you see the same negative velocity vector, and there's also a target pointer that shows you the opposite direction. So you can, normally when you're approaching a target, you will try to adjust your velocity to slow yourself down and make sure you encounter it at the right time. There, we get 46 seconds here. So the rule here is with the negative velocity vector, you want to push it, right? So you want to offset it, and as you fire, it will push the vector that way. So I'm just going to fire just a little here, see that? So this is me bringing it close to the target. And I'm just floating towards it. Once I get really close, I'm going to have to kill off all my relative velocity here. You can see there, I've adjusted it to here so you can actually see where it is. About 200 meters out, I think I'm going to bring my velocity down just a little. To actually stop relative to a target, you just keep firing against that negative velocity vector, right? There, 8.6 meters. 7. You want to make sure you don't hit it too fast, because of course that's never a good thing. You no need to be a Russian progress here. Famously, a Russian supply ship crashed into the Mir space station. So once within about 10 meters or so, just point your spacecraft along this negative velocity vector, use very small amounts of thrust, and bring your velocity down to 0. Just as small as you can. There, okay, now I've actually overdone it. We're now going away from the target. That's us rendezvoused. Now, if you had docking ports, you could try docking these things. This doesn't have a docking port, it doesn't come that way. But this will be a useful skill later on. So to get Ali out of there, we're going to switch back to her spacecraft, and we're going to EVA. That's her on the outside. Now it's dark. Press L to bring up the lights, and you got to figure out where they are. That's the target, that's the spacecraft there. So press space to let go, and she'll float away. R enables the RCS thrusters, and then you're going to fly her towards this target. It's probably a really good idea to save, by the way, because you don't want to get stuck. I'm going to do an EVA report because, yeah, sometimes you end up over targets that are useful to you that you may not have collected. I'm just going to keep that data. So I'm just going to fly towards this. So W makes you fly forwards in the direction your mouse is pointing. A and D let you move left and right. And then Shift moves you up and Control moves you down. So you just want to use that to approach this very carefully. See we go there? Okay, so the thing is on top. Oh, I'm going to have to try and get in here. Very, very careful and very, very slow. I'm trying to do it so you can see what where everything is. There, you see the door? You can also hold the left mouse button and turn them. You see that? So you can turn which way they're oriented, but as soon as you push any key, then they adjust back to this position. Okay, so I'm going to try and get there close enough. Press F to grab on, and that's us. Oh, F, and then B to board, yes. And that's us! And you know what? It's easy enough for us to get home now. You know how to get home, right? In fact, given that the video has hit like past the 20-minute mark, I'm going to leave that as an exercise to the viewer. All you're going to do is, of course, fire backwards in your orbit. Remember to adjust your navbar velocity to make sure you're going in the right direction. And then you will be home and with enough money to take on bigger and better challenges, which we shall cover in future episodes. Until then, I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.